Part of the class we're gonna get work. And it's to fill one out. So if you fill it out as we go, then it'll make more sense. Right? Because it'll be like a hands-on tutorial. That's it.
Yeah, it did. Okay, sir, there you go. Look good?
Perfect.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right,
I know that we write contracts more than anything else. I mean, really ultimately, other than prospect. And there's a lot of people who should be in this class and aren't. I've seen their contract.
I haven't filled out a contract in probably 9 years. Does them.
I don't know if I can make that bigger. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I want you guys to do is go in your MLS and I want you guys to open up a contract.
Okay, I immediately can't get in my MLS because I don't have my education. I can do this well.
You can log in as someone else.
Right.
Yeah, so do that. Because like I said, it'll mean more if you have one in front of you. Anna, can you hear us?
Hello.
If you can hear us, what I'd like you to do is open up your MLS and go to a real estate purchase contract in your MLS forms. Okay, do you guys get it? You're trying to get your login and password?
Yeah, but I'll follow along.
No, we can wait a second.
why are mine only, maybe I'm in the wrong place, but it's showing the Utah DRE form and the land rep C. Or am I in the wrong space? Am I supposed to be in SkySlow?
Nope.
Oh,
So go back to your fiscal forms
okay.
and then go to Legacy Forms Library. And then type in Rep C.
Sorry, thank you.
Yep, no, you're good. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fill out a Rep C. And you guys are gonna learn the pros and cons of why we want to put everything into each section. Okay. And I hopefully you guys can see each section because normally we make it bigger and then you can see just what it is. Okay. So the very top one, you don't have yours open yet.
No, but it's fine.
Do you want me to print you one? Can run my
I
office
just,
and print you one. Is your computer attached to the printer?
Yes,
Do you just want to hit print on that?
sure.
I just pulled one up.
Okay, so if you got one, perfect. Okay. So the very top part, it says on this blank day. Is your reference date. Now, for every other addendum, for every other part of the transaction, that is going to be your date forever on this contract. Okay, that is going to be your reference date. Now, where I see confusion is sometimes people will go on, let's say you're on addendum 4, they'll put a new date because it's 5 days later, whatever it is. It's always the same reference date. Okay, so whatever date that it currently is, the day you're going to get it written and signed is your reference date. Okay. The next section or the next line is your buyer. Now it's going to be the buyer and or all buyers. So if they legally use their middle initial or their full name, you want to put all of it in there because this is where the title company and the lender take all of their name and put it on the county records. Okay, on the title of the property. Now, if it's a LLC, if it's a business, just make sure you put all of it there, okay? Now, where some people, well, they'll say, oh, my mom's gonna co-sign. Well, the mom should be on there. Now, there's a way you can add the mom later to an addendum if you needed to, but if you already know the mom's gonna co-sign, put her on there as well. Okay? Offers to purchase from, same thing with the seller. Always put the seller's full name on there that you see in the county records. Now, as a listing agent, you should always put the owner's name down in the listing section. A lot of agents don't. Sometimes they don't put anything. Sometimes they put owner of record. They make it to where we have to do work. Do you guys know where to go find the owner's name?
Mhm.
Okay. Super important that you put it all on there. The next one is your earnest money. Question that I get often is how much is a good earnest money? So let's ask that. How much do you guys think is an adequate earnest money amount?
Whatever they're willing to make a serious offer with, like $2,000 to $3,000 is what I usually hear.
500 is when I was started out.
500 is probably low in this market, yeah, nowadays. Years ago, 500 was considered a good one. I mean, I remember when we used to do it for 100. But it has to be relevant to the purchase price. Now, if it's $1 million piece of land, you know, probably 2,000 is probably not adequate. But if it's a, you know, $420,000, 2,000 is probably adequate. Now, what you got to keep in mind is when we get to the default section, which is later on in the contract, your seller, not your seller, but the seller, if the seller goes into default, the seller's obligated to match that earnest money. So if it's a $400,000 home, you could see where you wouldn't want to do $100,000 earnest money, right? You know, well, they're paying cash, so why not? Well, because if there's a default, they're going to fight over that 100 grand, right? Because that's a big portion, a big percentage of that purchase. So you always got to keep that in mind. So let's say on your typical, let's just go off our average sales price. Let's just use 500 for today. Okay. So with 500,000, I probably would not do anything less than 2,500, but I probably wouldn't go more than 10 grand. So somewhere in there. Now the next in the form of blank. So that's a check, wire, electronic transfer. I've been really super happy with Earnest, you know, the app. And so that would be considered an electronic transfer. You don't have to write Earnest app because that's going to create more questions or like, oh, what's that? Is that even whatever? Have you guys used it yet?
No,
Have you guys,
Has,
have you guys used Venmo?
yes.
It works a lot like Venmo, where you, and it's actually, it's easier. It's not only time-wise easier, it tracks up easier than you physically going to get a check and then having to bring it here. The whole thing is that much smoother.
So do they deposit it through their bank? They just connect it or?
So what happens is when you open up the app, well, first thing is you want to get the app on your phone, on your smartphone. You want to download it and then you want to select KW Success, because then it locks it into here. Then when you go to use it, what you do is you have their email, you have the property address, and you have the earnest money amount, right? So you put that stuff in there, you put their name, you put their property address, so it's labeling it, then you put their email address. Then it shoots it to them. They accept it. I believe they don't have to download an app. They get like just a link that shows up as a text and or an email. But then they have to go do bank verification, right? So it's like a multi-step verification. Okay. Then from there, it almost works like Venmo, where you can send someone a request to pay you. That's almost how it shows up, but then it logs every step of it.
And
So,
it just comes right.
goes right into our trust account.
Yeah.
With it labeled. Yep.
And it's called Earnest?
Earnest app, yep.
Okay.
I believe it's spelled just like earnest money, but with two N's.
Okay.
Yeah, the biggest difference.
Is it
So-
the green one?
Yep, green one with the feather.
It's earn.
So, one of the cool parts, well, so. The Division of Real Estate as a brokerage, they require us, every time someone goes to deposit. Something in our trust account, we have to label it with a transaction ID number, right? We have to give it some sort of identifier. Now, if you think about your bank account, when you put money in there, do you know the $10? Do you know specifically which 10 so-and-so gave you? Or is it just all in the account? Do you see my point? It's just all in the account. So if you have to, you have to think of a trust account kind of like a bank vault with safety deposit boxes. And each box has that $10 from that person. So Ernest labels it that way. So it's just so much smoother. So, yeah. So the next part is the property address. So the full property address, okay? The city of Ogden, the county of Weber, and then the zip code, okay? Now, also there's a tax ID number. Now, one of the things I like to do, and it's because we've got burned in the past, is I put, after the tax ID number, I put / MLS number 1234 or whatever it is. Okay, you want to lock the MLS number to this contract.
The current one that we're listing.
The one that would be on the,
Okay.
upon this date.
Okay.
Do you guys want to know why?
Mhm.
Someone, an agent, a listing agent can go in and change the MLS after you go under contract. It labels all of it, so they're not supposed to, but let's say you make an
Why would
offer.
they want
Let's say the VAC got reduced. Let's say your offer came in low and you guys were negotiating it, they go in and change it from a 3 to a 2. And if they do it before they make it go under contract, it's locked in as that. So let's say that in your included items, we're not to that section yet, but let's say in your included items, you added a bunch of stuff that now they're gonna go in the MLS and exclude them. Right? They could go in and change stuff. So the idea would be is to lock in that MLS with it. So if anything changes, we can argue, well, we locked in that MLS on this date, therefore the VAC needs to be blank, and you need to include that fridge. So when you do them right in the MLS, it pre-populates all of their included and excluded items. So that's one of the reasons why I like to do it. Here's how we got burnt. We represented a seller, and we put in there, this was years ago, we put in there something along the lines of with full price offer, we'll redo the carpet with a carpet allowance of, let's say it was $3,500. And we decided to go with this one offer because all the other offers were the exact same, except for they all asked for the carpet allowance. This one did not. So the seller's like, oh, this one's a $3,500. They knew they were competing, so they'll do their own carpet, right? Well, they put as per MLS, even though they didn't put the carpet allowance in there, we had to pay for the carpet. And because the seller's like, well, you told us to take this one over the other ones because it didn't have the carpet allowance in there, so we want you guys to pay for the carpet allowance. So we paid for it out of our commissions. So ever since then, I'm like, no, let's add the MLS number. Okay. Section 1.2 and 1.3 are your included and your excluded items. I want you to be super, super specific. Do you guys have more than one fridge in your home? You guys don't? You do? A lot of times you'll have a fridge in your garage. A lot of times you'll have an extra freezer, right? You want to be specific. Like this says refrigerators. I don't know if you guys can see the S on the end right there. So if there's multiple refrigerators, if one's going to be excluded, make sure you're specific. Fridge in garage is excluded. Fridge in kitchen is excluded. Fridge in garage is included. Swing set is included. Make sure you're super specific when you're writing it. Now, it's not a bad idea, but if there's question, you want to almost put the make and model. Frigidaire fridge in kitchen, model, blah, blah, blah. To be included or excluded. I think that you'll either buy a fridge or the like in your career, or you'll know someone who did. Because we screw up on that regularly, especially when we get busy and we're like, oh man, I skipped over that. And I know you said you wanted to take your swing set for your kid, but they actually included it. So now you have to work through this. And so you kind of have a little bit of egg on your face before settlement, right? So the worst is when it's after settlement. Water service. So this says it shall include all water rights and shares unless they're excluded. Okay, so if you're dealing with a property, there's a lot of properties out there that don't have that have separate water that's attached. A lot of times it's larger parcels. It's not uncommon that they have just culinary and then secondary, which automatically would go with it, because it's just like a subscription, right? They just pay for it every month and they get it, or yearly, or however they pay. But there's a lot of pieces of property that have shares attached to it. So if you have, let's say, 52 shares of the Hooper Water District, but you're only gonna sell your property with 50 of them, you specifically have to exclude 2. And hopefully the listing agent has put it in there, which 2, water share from Hooper Water District, certificate 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever it is, right? So you want to be specific about it. Questions on that part? Okay. Payment purchase price. Oh, there's questions in the chat. Anna, do you want to talk, or do you want to just chat?
I can talk. I didn't know if you could hear me.
Oh, she's talking about earnest money. I don't like to tie it to a percentage. Because then if I tie it to a percentage, people start talking about it. Like, well, shouldn't it be 2%? Shouldn't it be 1.5%? She made another comment. Do you think maybe I turn the volume down? I don't dare mess with something. Yeah, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. So now we're on the purchase price. Now, here's the part that a lot of people screw up, and I see it regularly, is they'll have a different number here than here, but those 2 numbers have to be the exact same. Okay, now your earnest money obviously should match the earnest money you did up there. Additional earnest money, a lot of times at 0. New loan. What is the trick to use if they're putting down a little amount? If I'm paying a ton down, I want to show that off by putting that ton amount in their balance at purchase price. And my new loan is going to be a smaller amount, right? So I'll show that off. If my people are putting down very little, or they're doing like Utah housing or something like that, a lot of times I put to be determined, TBD. So I'll put that in 2.1C and 2.1E. I put to be determined, and then I explain that to the agent that, hey, we're looking at blah, blah, blah. Now, all of these numbers right here are subject to change. So they can definitely change depending on what the buyer and the loan officer feels going to be best. So when someone goes in and makes a loan application, what happens is, let's say there's 10 products that fall into their realm. They'll pick the 1 or 2 that work best for them, and they'll weigh those both out. And then they'll say, let's go with this one. So they're looking at this and this. Everything else is
TBD.
to be
And
determined.
you use that a lot?
Not a lot. Because if I know that they have the ability to put 100 grand down, even though they might not, I'm gonna put the 100 grand down.
Because that can.
So it
all
makes it
change.
look stronger, because it can all change. Now, if they only have, if I'm gonna do 100% financing, that's when I'll do the TBD, because I don't want them to see that they're not putting a lot down. It just makes them look as, if I show that they're not putting a lot down, it makes them not look as strong of a borrower.
You have people call you, what does this mean, why did you put that, and then you just explain.
Yep. So no, they don't call me because I've already called that.
Okay.
So what I do is, before I even write my offer, I'll have a conversation about all these items with the agent before I write it. I'll just say, hey, Sadie, I really like your property on 123 Main Street. My buyers loved it. We've seen a handful of homes and it's their #1 choice. What is your seller looking for? And they'll kind of briefly, not tell her everything we're going to do, but kind of get an idea of what they're looking to do. And if she says, price is the #1 important thing, and we want to get it quickly, my Utah housing person might not have a chance, especially if she says, yeah, and I got 3 other people sending me offers too. We might not have a chance. So I'm not going to throw it out there. Well, we're going to do 100% financing for Utah housing. I won't throw that out there yet. Does that make sense? So, but what I'll say is, well, we're going to write the best offer we possibly can. I know that they're not cash. However, we're going to do some financing on it. I'm going to send you the pre-approval, And I could have my loan officer call you as well, because they are super strong, they just don't have a lot of cash. See, I answered that without answering it, does that make sense? So, okay. Now this next section, all of these need to add up to that number and that number, okay? Next section, 2.2, is if they're going to have to sell their property or a property in order to make the purchase happen. Now, the reason why I say don't lie is because I don't want you to lie. I don't know how many agents will say, well, they don't have to, so I'm not really lying, but they prefer to. Well, if you're not going to make the offer contingent upon it, then you better not use that as the reason to cancel. Right? If you're going to try to stretch the truth, that you can't use that as a reason to cancel. Questions so far on page 1? I have no idea why they put these 2 pages side by side. Okay, so you guys know the difference between settlement and closing, correct? Did you guys know that the title company lenders got 4 days to complete it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember that.
A lot of people don't, but that's why we put that highlighted in there. And so what it means is the seller and the buyer by the settlement date, which we'll get to those deadlines in section 24. What it means is that all parties are going to go in and sign by that before 5 o'clock on that deadline. Now, the buyer has to actually have already started the wire to go into their account. A lot of times they go settle first and then go to their bank. They're really supposed to do it first. But they all have 4 days to complete all of it. Possession and recording. I feel that in time, they'll probably move that deadline to section 24. But possession, that's another conversation I have when I call the agent. When I say, what is your seller looking for? They say, oh my gosh, they've been in this house for 30 years. And they're helping their mom move out, but she's elderly. So if they could have the weekend, that would be great, right? So then I'll make sure I put, 48, 72 hours in here. And if it's a vacant home, I'm automatically going to do upon recording. Okay, so that's how you could vary. Now, there was a market not that long ago where the new buyer didn't know where they were going. Sorry, the new seller didn't know where they were going to go as a buyer. So what they would do is they'd be like, can we have a week? Right. And that wasn't uncommon. That was pretty common. I think anything more than 30 days needs to be on a whole nother contract because that becomes like a lease. And
We do that.
it's
What we do.
a lot of times they have no idea what they're going to do.
They need the money that we're gonna give them to go somewhere else.
Okay. Special assessment, don't leave that blank. I typically, if the listing agent doesn't say anything or the listing doesn't say anything, I'll typically put seller, but I will never put my buyer automatically unless they tell me something and we pre-agreed it. I'll always put either seller or split equally. And I do that same thing on the HOA or that it does not apply. So I'll put NA never, but never leave it blank. Section 5 is your agency disclosures. So this is where the filling it out right in the MLS is helpful because it actually will pre-populate their license and their brokerage numbers in there. And when you're the one filling it out, it pre-populates yours. So if you're logged in as Trevor, it's going to pre-populate his stuff. So you just got to be aware of that. Now you guys understand limited agency, right? Okay. So we don't need to go too much into that. Oh, I have the other one right here, huh? Now there's no changes to the contract and no changes to the house without first having authorization from all parties involved. So when I say that, let's say we actually had, we represented a trust. The home had like, let's say 5 or 6 people that were all adult children of this family trust. And one of them's, let's say one of their kids lived there. So it would be like the granddaughter of the actual owners. Okay. So they were the ones who were helping take care of grandma. They were taking care of the property. The mom of those people, even though she's one of 4 heirs, went and signed a new lease that said that they get to live there for 5 years. with no rent increases. So they did this, sure, we went under contract. We were like, no, you cannot do that. So that had to be in writing. They wanted to argue, so they had shown this section that, hey, you can't make any changes without authorization. Now, sometimes that buyer doesn't care, right? Sometimes that buyer is like, hey, I'm just gonna use this for investment property. Yeah, I love it that they want to stay. But now they gotta be on my lease, not on your lease, right? So there's sometimes it doesn't make that much difference. Short-term rentals, we see that happen all the time because let's say it's in the nightly rental websites, nightly rental apps, right? And if they don't lock it up, and this new buyer says, hey, you know what, I'm gonna occupy this property, I don't need to rent it out anymore. If they're not specific, you know, if they're buying a nightly rental, as an agent, you need to say, hey, what's your plan with the property? Are you gonna keep it in the nightly rental pool and just make everything come to be yours? And if not, let's let them keep renting it, or if you are, and you want to stay there certain days, let's get you on those days. Because you want them to keep filling it up, right? So there's ways that can change. And those ones change all the time. Like, they literally can change by the minute. Seller disclosures. That's a big list of items. It's a huge list of items. So as a listing agent, you want to make sure you start getting all of that stuff before you let it hit the market. The PR, when we get to the dates on section 24, this is violated often because of the PR. The title work takes time. So the second you get a listing, you want to start your process. I would even, if you know you're going to get it signed, but not go on the market for a week, get title work started, get it done. Yeah, so if you know there's a tenants, if you know it's short or long term, start gathering all that information. You have a short window of time to get to the new buyer. Okay. Buyer due diligence. It is or is not conditioned upon it. I always suggest that it is. If they check is not, they do not have to allow the buyer to do any inspections. Well, I'm not going to cancel based on what I still want to know. I'm sorry, I don't have to allow it. They probably still could or would, but they don't have to. Okay. Now what you guys need to understand too is on the dates on section 24, you not only have to do all your inspections, you have to negotiate all your items based upon it. Okay, so if you find that the inspector says, hey, I can't really tell for sure, but I think the roof doesn't have a full 5 years left on it. And so now I have to get a roofer to go look at it, give me verification. That takes extra time, but you only have until your deadline to not only get that new roofer out there and negotiate if something has to change with that. Okay.
So how many weeks do you normally use for those deadlines?
We're gonna get to those, because those are the things that I think can make a contract good or make them bad. Okay. Same thing with appraisal, that it is or is not contingent upon having it appraised. It almost always is if there's going to be financing involved through a regular lender. If it's a private lending, they don't do them. Not as often, but they still could, I guess. Same thing, you have till your deadline to negotiate any appraisal issues you possibly have. Section 8.3 is if your financing is required or not required. If no financing is required, that ultimately means they're paying cash. You have until your dates in order to cancel if something goes wrong with their loan or if they don't like it. This section 8.3I would mean if I cancel, I'm going to give X amount of dollars to the seller. So let's say we did a $2,500 earnest money, but I'm going to give 500. That's where I'm going to put 500 right in there. So they're saying, hey, I'm going to give you $500 if I cancel. Down on section 8.4 is if there will or will not be additional earnest money. A lot of land deals where there's a lot of moving parts will say, okay, the earnest money for now is 10 grand, but I'm going to do an additional 10 grand upon removing of our contingencies. So that's where you do an additional. You don't see that very often. Number 9 is if there are or are not any addendums that are gonna be included. What's the most common one we see?
FHAV.
FHA, VA, and then just your regular ones. Your regular one could have about anything and everything on there. But yeah, the FHA, VA, and when the interest rates go up, we start seeing the seller financing more often as well. Which I love seller financing, it makes it easier to purchase property. Home warranty, if there is going to be one or is not, and then who's going to order it, who's gonna pay for it. And then the price of it. I don't always include them, but I do encourage them.
And does the buyer or seller, the buyer usually will get it. their own.
So when I represent my when I represent my client, I always try to get them ordered. So I use IBEX most of the time, and they do not do a listing coverage one, but I still like to order it in advance, so it's already in the queue. So when I have that conversation with that agent on the phone, who's you're getting ready to wrap me an offer, I say, and I even put in agent remarks, hey, by the way, there is an IBEX home warranty included on this. And they'll send you the policy number as soon as we go under contract. So that way, it's already kind of been issued and ordered, so I can skip that part, and then they'll really go in negotiation who's gonna pay for it. That's how I can control which company it's gonna go to. But I do that on both sides. If I represent the buyer, I'm like, I prefer IBEX, so I'm gonna say that we're gonna select it and we're gonna order it, but I'm asking your seller to pay for it. Getting a seller to commit to one is one of the easiest things in the world. A few years back, there was a home warranty on this property, thank goodness, but it was Christmas Eve. And it wasn't like last year where we had a super horrible winter. That was like the world's longest winter. It was a few years ago and it was a typical winter, but it was literally Christmas Eve. They came back from sledding or whatever they were doing as a family, and they call me and they're like, Sean, our furnace is out. What are we gonna do? And at Christmas Eve, it's like, who wants to go take care of a furnace? And I was like, you know what, we got a home warranty on it, let's get it taken care of. We literally had, we had the home warranty company there within like several hours. They all jumped on it because it's Christmas Eve, they didn't want these little kids to have a horrible Christmas, because there's no heat in it. Because what is the only option? Really is for them to go find somewhere else to stay the night, right? Because it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and as it got later, it's gonna get colder. Home warranty company had it fixed within like 5 hours. And I don't remember if they had to replace it or what they did. But imagine if I got that phone call and I gotta call the other agent who now has to call the seller, right? Do you think I'm gonna get heat turned back on before morning? Probably not. I'm probably not even gonna get a hold of that other agent. So I use that story and it's like, oh my gosh, the peace of mind is so worth it. I don't want them calling because I feel guilty, it's see, right? And you never know when a furnace is gonna go off. Okay, so the seller fills out their condition property disclosure, but what people need to understand is the property is really purchased as is. So once I look as a buyer, once I look through the disclosure to what the seller discloses and I do my inspections, I'm deeming everything acceptable. So what I tell my sellers, make sure you fill that out appropriately, because they're like, well, I don't want them to know about it. No, you do want them to know about that, because if you don't disclose it, something happens because of it, then you're gonna be in trouble that you hid it. So just put everything on there that you know. A lot of times they'll go, well, I've never occupied that home. Like, well, yeah, but it was your mom's for how many years? So yes, check the box that you never occupied it. However, you knew your mom replaced a roof, but you can't remember if it was in the late 90s or early 2000s. Write that. Just be honest about it. So within 7 days, which I think is horrible, I think it should be closer. Horrible because if you negotiated some work to be done on a property, they have until settlement to get it done. And if you go 7 days early, you're not going to see some of the work. The reason why you're going through your pre-settlement walkthrough. The idea is to verify that things are as they were and or fixed for the terms. So this most common and most effective is that it's literally the day before settlement or day of settlement. So if we're going to settle at 11 o'clock at a title company, let's go do our walkthrough at 10. That's the most appropriate. Now, it doesn't really work if you're closing at 11 and you go at noon, right? You wanna go through before. Changes during the contract, we talked about all the, like, the lease and all of that kind of changes. But one thing I need to remind everyone as well is that they cannot go into any more debt against that property. Now, that is common with seller finance. A lot of times you'll buy a property, seller financing, that person thinks they can go do a new mortgage on it because they think they still own it. No, I own the property now. You're just playing banker, so you can't change the terms of that. You can't go into any more debt. But that includes, like, if they had a HELOC on there, that's a revolving account. No, you can't add anything new. It's not a new loan, but you can't add any more amount.
But the HELOC doesn't transfer to the new owner, right? Does that stay with this?
It stays with it'll stay against the property until it's paid off.
Okay, so it's like a lien.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So no new liens and then no more adding to a prior lien. Complete contract. So if you think of like an old school manila file that has like your contract, all your addendums, your seller's disclosures, all of their rent rolls, all of that stuff thrown into that one manila folder. Think of that big manila folder as one contract. Okay, they're not like 10 individual ones. I try to use a manila folder because it's easier way for people to visualize it. Think of that whole big thing as the one contract. Mediation, what is my preference for people to do? Shall versus may. My preference is may. And the reason being is shall says, hey, I can't go to court. We have to mediate first, where may says we have options. Okay, I want people to mediate first if they can. I want to try to have those conversations up front, but there are times where we can't mediate. And I'll give you an example of why I switched to that. There's a large brokerage out there that they coach, tell everyone to do shall. And we had a mediation once with that company. And I used to work for that company, so I'm not bashing them. I just didn't like this policy. Anyway, I'm the broker here at KW, and we're doing a mediation with their company. And the agent and the seller, maybe they were the buyer, I can't remember which one they were. They walk in and they both carry concealed guns. They sit down, and because of the comfort level of what their claim was, they set their guns on the table. How do you think our client felt? A little intimidated?
Yeah.
Yeah, it changed the whole dynamic of the meeting. They probably did it on purpose. It was like posturing, which that's actually, there's a law that you can't show someone your gun. And they're like, no, that's not what we meant. It was just when I sat in that chair, there was an arm on it, and it didn't, like, then don't bring your gun there, bro. Why do you need your gun here? Like, yeah. Anyway, that's why I do may, because we want options. Default. Here is a part that I want everyone to truly understand. If the buyer goes into default, what are the seller's options?
I know.
What are their options, Jesse?
Options are, if the seller goes into default,
No, buyer.
buyer. The buyer goes into default, the seller can sue to enforce or keep the earnest money.
One.
Which buyer goes into
That's
keep
probably the
earnest-
most common.
Most common, the seller keeps the earnest money.
Mhm.
Seller can sue to enforce the terms of the contract,
Bam.
or seller can retain the earnest money and pursue other remedies available.
Which are super damages.
Super damages.
Okay, so let's say is the market's declining, they have to resell it to someone else. They sell it for 10 grand cheaper because now they gotta get it gone. They could say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna sue you for that 10 grand difference because you guys screwed us up. We gave you guys 3 extensions. You guys didn't perform. You guys said this, this, and this. You guys just didn't perform. At the end of the day, no, we're not gonna just take your earnest money and we're gonna sue you for damages, right? That could happen. How's that happened? Doesn't happen very often. Super performance. Guess how many times I've actually as a broker had to go to court to sue someone for performance? 0. Guess how many times we've enforced that? Probably 20. So a lot of times we're like, well, we're just gonna go down the road, we get an attorney to do what's called a lis pendens, which is a Latin term for lawsuit pending. So they file lis pendens. What does that do? That means the seller cannot do anything else with the property, or the buyer can't do anything else with the property. It's locked up. And we say, we're gonna force you to sign. So we've never actually had to go to court. But it's the way that works. Doesn't happen very often, but it does work. Attorney's fees. The state of Utah says that you have to pre-agree if a loser is going to pay a winner's attorney's fees if attorneys and courts are involved. So that's why that section's in there. It also, our law also states, which there's a law on the books right now that someone's trying to change that. One of the legislators trying to change that it's automatic. I'm like, no, let's just keep it in the contract. All notices have to be in writing and signed by the party given notice. And no assignment can happen unless it's permissible. What makes an assignment permissible?
I should know it.
You okay?
Yes.
Walking slow, kind of thing.
Yeah, I got a knee injury. I just got a baby. I got bursitis.
What's a permissible transfer? It has to be in writing and agreed upon. That's what makes it permissible. Now, when I was talking about the names at the very, very beginning, the names of your buyer, you could put and or assignees. Okay, a lot of these wholesalers are not doing that, and if they did, it would make the whole part a lot easier. Okay, a permissible transfer has to be in writing and has to be signed by everyone. Okay, now they can't say, hey, we're going to give you an addendum because we want to sign our interest to XYZ. However, you got to get the seller to agree to it. The seller doesn't have to agree to it. That's why you want to put and or assigns to do it. Okay. Insurance and risk of loss. You guys know what could happen with that.
Like if there's a disaster while you're in a contract.
Yep. Can't see that top of that page very well. Let's say we have a settlement tomorrow. And we represent, well, it doesn't matter which party we represent. We have a settlement tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday and it's supposed to record by Friday so everyone can be moving in and out on Saturday. And tonight, horrible windstorm happens or snowstorm or something and knocks a tree branch down that comes right through the window. Who's responsible to fix it? Seller. Now, let's say that settlement happened this morning, that thing happened tonight. Who's responsible to fix it? The buyer. Now, here's where it's different. If it's more than 10% of the purchase price, either party could cancel. So let's say the whole entire roof blows off because of it's Kansas and it's Wizard of Oz, right? And the whole roof blows off. The seller doesn't have to sell and the buyer doesn't have to buy. They still could, but obviously it's going to change everything. Right now, your lender's going to be freaking out, like it's going to cause a lot of turmoil. So neither party has to, they couldn't really enforce either party to do it. They both have options or reasons to not do it. That's what that is.
Who would it default to if they can't agree? Would it go to court?
Well, it would default to the seller keeping the house.
Okay,
If the buyer says, I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah.
Then the seller can't force the buyer to do it. They can't even take them to court to do it. But let's say the buyer still wants it. And the seller's like, no, I'm gonna have to fix this. It's gonna cost me a lot of money. I'm not gonna be able to sell it. I'm gonna have to live here. I'm gonna have to figure that out. And the buyer can't sue the seller to sell it. Right? So if either party doesn't want to move forward, neither party can. And time is of the essence. So what does that mean?
Meaning. If you don't get something signed by what on the contract.
Means we're gonna work hard to get everything done in a timely manner. And that includes being cooperative, like a seller can't say, oh, their deadline for we want to cancel this contract because we have another one in backup. That's even better. So we're gonna make it to where we won't let their inspector in. That's a violation of times of the essence, right? But what it also means is your deadlines are 5 p.m. on the date of the thing. Okay, it's always 5 p.m. So that doesn't mean at 5:02, you send over the cancellation, because they don't have to accept it. Now acceptance happens when?
So that when the other person opens the email or they answer the phone call or whatever,
Nope,
no?
Just
When it's signed,
oh, don't dilly dally. Okay, so acceptance happens when all of this occurs. So you have to sign the acceptance. And you have to communicate it. Okay, do I have to receive it back? No, this has to be signed and communicated that it's been signed. Okay, now, an agent can't say, well, I never saw the email. Well, it doesn't matter if you didn't see the email. I never got the email because it went in my spam folder. I don't care if it's, you know, we had a conversation last night and I told you it was signed and sent. Now, even if it said, even if I say, hey, that is signed and I'm communicating that to you now. However, I won't be able to get an email back to you till tonight at after 5. So just know that it's signed and it'll be coming in your email. And if you're not gonna be working after 5, you'll have it in your email in the morning. Right? But that's still communicated. You can no longer say, well, I never received it. That doesn't count. Okay. Now, section 24. Let's talk about those dates. What is the best one to start with? This is a trick question.
the settlement thing. I would say D, because that's your end result. No,
And this is why it's a trick question.
Okay.
I would start with possession.
Okay.
Remember earlier when I said I believe in time, it'll be in this section. The reason why you should start with possession. I'm gonna put pops right there. Because if they look at their calendar, you guys have a calendar up. If they look at your calendar, I truly believe settlement is the best to do on a Wednesday or Thursday. Because if we have settlement on a Friday, and I represent the buyer, all the seller has to do is sign later in the day. And even if I put upon recording, if they sign by 4:55, because it's gotta be by 5, that means it's not gonna get recorded on that day. It's gonna be on Monday, so they get the whole week. Right? So that's why I start with possession. So I ask them, I say, when do you want to be taking possession of the property? And you would say, can't think of a good example. It's really good around Christmas or time, or what's a holiday? I want to be in by St. Patrick's. Let's say that. I don't know what day of the week St. Patrick's is. Kind of a weird holiday. We're gonna have a rage.
Yeah.
I have an annual St. Patrick's Day party and I want to be in by that date. So what day is the Friday before?
15.
Okay, so in my mind, I know if I want to be in there for my rager, I gotta be in there by the 15th at the latest. So I'm probably going to now default back to here for any instances. I'm gonna probably default back to section 24D as the 14th. Now, I'm going to ask my lender. Hey, can you guys get this done? I know that's a little short of 30 days. However, can you get it done in time? And I don't know what today's date is, the 24th. There's not a lot of holidays between now and then. Is there President's Day? Well, that's not a bank holiday though.
President's Day.
I think there's President's Day. It's really the only bank holiday between now and then. So they're barely short 30 days. I believe they could probably get it done. And my lender might say, you know what? I know I go to this rater every year, but I might not be able to get it done by then. If they say, yes, I can get it done, bam, that's a damn good thing. Now, how I'm gonna sell this to the other agent is, hey, I know it's a little bit less than 30 days, and I know when we had our conversation, you said that they would like a typical 30-day closing. However, this is what we're gonna do for you guys, and I don't mind, and my buyer doesn't mind. We're gonna save them from making their February house payment. When are house payments due? First.
Yeah.
When are they late?
The third,
The 15th.
oh, okay.
So I'm gonna have your seller paid off before their payment's actually late. Right? I'm not gonna even tell them about the rager. Right? I'm gonna tell them that's what. So you have different ways you can get around it. So then I would build my dates going back, okay? Now, what date would this be? I don't know what day of the week that was that a Thursday? A Wednesday? So I would probably go to the Friday before. So what was that Friday before?
The, 15th. Oh, that's February, sorry.
The ninth,
So I would probably make that one by the night. And I would probably make this one by. What's the Friday before? That might be too much, because that's too short of time, I think. I would probably make this that Monday, so let's say it's the 5th. Even though these are two little close together, we're shortening the whole time frame. And then, let's say that this one would be, because we're writing their offer now, let's give them, it's Thursday or Wednesday, we'll give them till. A couple days to go under contract, we'll give them till next Tuesday to get us all this stuff. What is next Tuesday's date?
30th of January.
Jan 30th. So that's kind of how I work my dates. Now, obviously, if you go farther out, your typical escrow period is about 30 to 35 days. If you go farther out, these dates don't have to be as cramped. Okay, now, as a listing agent, one of the things I don't like is if they have a reason to cancel regardless of which date it is, right close to this one, I want to have a little bit of a gap. So I keep that in mind as I'm writing my offers. Questions on your dates? This is these dates right here is the things that we change most often on our contracts. So having a lot of communication with all parties about these dates in advance is super, super helpful. Your lender, if your lender's got any doubts, don't do it unless your lender's gonna give you the green light to do it.
Okay.
If they give you any red flags, don't do it.
Don't write a,
Yeah, you're walking your lender in for that. And they don't wanna be like one of those people where, you know what, I'm gonna need an extension right out of the gate. So let's say we get this offer accepted Saturday morning or Friday night. Monday morning, the lender gets this, and my lender's already told me he can't do it. Are they gonna be happy? Probably not. Probably not. Okay, questions?
until I really go to do it.
So,
I'll have questions
Okay, so
again.
here's your homework assignment, and here's why I wanted you to have a computer in front of you. I want you, based upon this class, I want you to write me an offer and send it to me. And then we can sit down, go over it one by one, or we can go over it as a group and say, we can literally take notes on the one you wrote. And then that can be like your master, your template for when you go to write them in real life.
Are you gonna send us the ML?
I'm happy to, or you can write it on anyone. Do you prefer me to give you a specific property to write it on?
It doesn't matter.
We just wanted-
Yeah, you can pick one.
So do we want to just use fake names or?
Yeah, you could use Fred
Okay.
Flintstone, right? John and Jane Doe, whatever you
Whatever.
wanted. Yeah,
Okay.
you could use a real one if you wanted.
All right, and then just email it to you.
Yeah, just email. And then what we'll do is we'll look over it, and depending on how you send it, which I prefer a PDF. I literally can print it out and I can write notes right on it, or I can just write on section 1, I would change this, or for the most part, I think that after you go through and you start writing them yourself and being like in a room by yourself, thinking through it, you'll probably not have hardly any mistakes. What I'm finding is when you start making the mistakes is when you've got a client sitting, looking over your shoulder, you know, that saying about watching the water boil. For whatever reason, we get nervous, and the offers that we've written 5 times perfectly in practice, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do I do here? So the idea is that you're writing one and it comes out pretty good, and then you can use it as a template.
Great.
Because when do we write most of our offers?
I don't know. When do we?
At night?
Anna, did you hear what I said about the MLS numbers? I can give you one if you guys want.
I can just.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay. Thanks for coming to the class.
Thank
guys.
you.
So when I was co-teaching with Allison until she gets back, I was gonna do this one, but we were co-teaching it because we would go through this part and then she was showing people how to do the document sending and all of that as well. So she was going one step further. And that's why the class was an hour and a half, because the last half hour was how to upload it into your system and send it. And things like
Do you know when she might be back at all yet?
that. I honestly, I really want her to take her. time.
Yeah.
Because I don't want her to feel that pressure, because I can, imagine dealing with what she's dealing with. But at the same time, I'm not gonna say it wouldn't be, I think it would be good for her to
Yeah,
Yeah.
start focusing on other stuff too.
at least herself, her stuff, coaching might be a lot.
So I went to her celebration of life that they had on Friday. Friday or Saturday, whatever day it was, I don't remember. And I think she's just going like a zombie, just going
Yeah.
wherever she's. Yeah,
Yeah.
completely shocked.
I went to her the viewing and I felt like that's exactly, she was just shocked, like unbelievable.
And I think you have good days, like my uncle, who's really close to my age, actually, his wife passed away a couple days before Christmas. And sometimes you talk to him and he seemed like fine, and we'd be like, "He's fine," and then, but then the next day it was.
Could be opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be tough, because what I think is. When it first happens, you're going through the routine of talking to everyone about stuff, you're working on funeral plans and all that. It's like 3 weeks
Isn't it?
later.
Yeah,
3 weeks later, all of that white noise
Yeah.
is done, everyone else is in their routines, and all of a sudden you wake up and they're not there. That's what's gonna be. I feel bad for her. Thanks for coming, Anna.
Okay, so is this like a weekly thing that I need to come every week?
I'm actually only doing this monthly.
Oh, monthly, okay.